In this lab, let's take a look at how to model this punch handle in SolidWorks. So I've started a new SolidWorks part file, and my units are metric, and so I'm going to start out with a rectangle which I'll revolve to get this feature right here. So I'll go to the front plane and I'll start a new sketch, and I'm going to do a rectangle from the origin, and I'll go over to the right or to the left, and then I'm going to change this line that's going to the origin, the horizontal line, to a construction line. I'll then do dimension, and so I'll dimension from the center line up to the line on top, and make sure you get below the center line so it puts it in as a diametral dimension, and that will be 30. Now notice my text is oriented vertically, and that's the ISO standard. I want to change this to the ANSI standard, and so I'm going to go to my options, and I'll go to document properties, and instead of ISO I'm going to use the ANSI standard, and I need to make sure that my units are still on millimeters. And then I will dimension the length of this, and we see that it's 355. This feature is really long compared to the rest of the part, so I'm going to shorten that, and then we'll change the length of it later. So I'm going to dimension this distance as the instead of 355, I'll dimension it as 35.5, and then later I'll just move that decimal place. Alright, we see that it all turns dark, it's all fully constrained. Now it's an open profile, so when I go to features and I do revolve, it's going to tell me that it's open. Do I want it to close it? I'll tell it yes, I want it to close that profile for me, and I'll say OK to that, and I'll save my part, and I'll call this handle. Alright, I'm going to go back to the front view, and I'm going to start a new sketch on the front plane. And for this feature I'm going to come over horizontally and then come down, so I'm going to do the center line of this feature to define the size of it. So I'll draw a line from the origin over horizontally and down at an angle. I'll then dimension that line, and so the distance from the origin here over to the end of this line, the center line, 135 horizontally. So I'm going to dimension from here over to here as 135, and then the distance vertically from this center line down is 150. So I'll dimension from here to here as 150, and then the angle between these two center lines 120. So I'll dimension that angle as 120. We see that it turns black, that the sketch is all fully defined. Now there are a couple of different ways that we could model this, and I think I'll show you an easy way in SolidWorks. But to keep this consistent to the way that I showed you in Inventor, I'm then going to undo that method and do it the way that I would do it in Inventor, or the same way that we did it in Inventor. So this distance from here to here is 110. So let me expand this so we can see this a little bit better. So if I go to features and I do extrude, because this is an open profile, Fusion or SolidWorks creates something called a thin feature, and so it asks you for the thickness of that thin feature, and I'm going to tell it the thickness is 30, and instead of just that's the 30 from here to here, but I want it mid-plane, so instead of one direction I'll tell it mid-plane, and then up here I'll tell it mid-plane for the direction going this way, and that one will be 110. I'm going to undo this step. So that would be the way I would actually do it in SolidWorks, but let me show you an alternate technique. And so I will do the undo And we're back to where we have the sketch, and instead of doing the thin feature, I'm going to do it as a surface. Now if you don't have a tab here that says surfaces, right click and go to your tabs, and you could set it to surfaces here. And I'll click on surfaces, and I'll do an extrude surface, and I'm going to extrude that surface mid-plane, a distance of 110, just like we did in Inventor. Now there's good reasons to know how to model using surface modeling. It might not be so beneficial on this part, but there are other parts where it could be beneficial. Most people associate surface modeling with complex organic shapes, but it can help in even some very simple shapes sometimes to use a hybrid combination of surface modeling and solid modeling. I am then going to do a thicken of this surface, and actually before I do that, notice at the top of the browser, just like in Inventor, it says Solid Bodies 1 and Surface Bodies 1. So then I'll do thicken, and I will select the surface. I'm going to tell it I want to go mid-plane. I want to thicken both sides, and I want the distance to be 30, and I want it to merge it to the cylinder. So I'll say OK to that. And actually when I did that, I see that when I went to 30, it did twice that distance, so it went 30 on either side. So let's edit that feature, and we'll go 15 for it on each side for a total of 30. I did something right, save it. Okay, the next step I'll do is I'll go to the top view, and again, if it rotates it in an orientation that you don't like, if you use the Alt key and the left or right arrow keys, you can rotate it around. In this case, I'm rotating it to look like the original drawing. Alright, then I'm going to do a new sketch on the top plane, and I'm going to draw a rectangle in space about from here over, and I'll click on this line and it'll automatically snap to that line. I'll then draw a line from the origin to the midpoint of this line, make sure it snaps to the midpoint, and then I'm going to put a horizontal constraint on this line. So I select that line, I'll do horizontal, make horizontal. And now if I test that out, this stays centered relative to the origin. We'll put the two dimensions, 18 and 20 on here. So I'll do dimension, and from here to here, and that is 18. And I'll dimension the 20 from here to here. So there's the 20. And because we've centered that, it is symmetrical. Now you can change this to a construction line, or you can leave it the way it was. It doesn't really matter. Then I'll go to my Features tab, and I'll do Extrude. And I need to go both up to cut through this way, and I need to go down. So I'll tell it to go mid-plane, and I want to actually go through all. And notice though there isn't a mid-plane through all. So I have to go through all in one direction. I could do from a surface from this face down, but let's just go ahead and see how to do it in two steps. So I'll do through all in this direction, and then I'll come down here where it says direction 2, and I want to go through all in the second direction, and so that's the equivalent of the Inventor technique that we used. And I made the classical beginner mistake of forgetting to put that on solid cut. So we'll undo that. We'll say that I did that on purpose to demonstrate how to do that. So I'll go back to my features, make sure you do extruded cut, and we'll tell it to go through all in the first direction. In direction 2 we'll go through all as well, and we'll say OK to that. And so there is our feature. We'll save it. Alright, the next thing we want to do is put this diameter 40 cylinder, and so I'm going to start a new sketch on the front plane, and I'm going to convert entities this edge right here, and it will project that as a line into my new sketch. I'll draw a circle at the midpoint of this line. Make sure you snap to the midpoint, and I'll dimension that sketch. And let me show you a little trick on dimensioning. So we can go up here and do smart dimension, or if we hold the right mouse button down, and notice if I, with holding the right mouse button down, if I go up, this is dimension, this is circle, this is line, and this is rectangle. And so I'm going to just swipe up, and I get into the dimension command, and I'll dimension this as a diameter of 40. Alright, then I'll go to features, and I'll tell it that I want to extrude, and I'm going to, here where it says sketch plane, I'm going to select a surface or plane, and I'll select this face back here, and then for the direction I'll tell it to go up to surface, and I'll tell it to go up to this surface right here, and we'll say OK to that. Now it tells me though, because I have both open and closed contours in there, I have this line which I probably should have changed that line to a construction line. It's not sure what to do, so we'll come down here to selected contours, and I'll have to get out of this error command, and under selecting contours I'll select that circle, and it looks like I'm going to have to select these surface again. So from this surface and then up to this surface, and I'm expecting it to preview, and it's not previewing, so I'm going to say OK and see if it does it. And so it is giving me an error, so I'm going to start from the beginning. And let's just go back and change this so I don't get that previous error. So let's right click on this, and I'm going to change that to construction. And then I'll do my extrude again, so I'll go to extrude. I'll tell it, instead of starting from the sketch plane, so I want to go from this surface, and I want to go up to this surface, and it's already selected at this time because I changed that line to a construction line. I don't have to do the selected contour. I'll say OK to that. Alright, now we only want the portion from here to here and from here to here. We don't need the 51 in between there. So I'm going to right click on this sketch and turn the visibility on. So I'll do show. Let's highlight that sketch so that it's highlighted in the browser. It's highlighted over here in the graphics window, and I'm going to do extrude cut this time. So I'll do extrude cut. I'm going to go mid plane, a distance of 51. And so that cut that portion out in between there. I'll hide that sketch, save it, and then the next step I'm going to do is to start to put some of the fillets on here. Now it's critically important the order in which you do fillets. So, and takes experience, and then it also takes trial and error. So do the fillets in different order till you get the aesthetic results that you want. Alright, I'm going to do the fillets in the corners here, 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 and here first. And so I see that those fillets are radius 10. So I'll select this edge, and I'll do fillet. And its default's on radius 10, so I'll select this edge, and I'll rotate around, and I'll select this edge, and I'll select that edge, and I'll select OK to that. Alright, then I'm going to fillet this inside edge here and this inside edge here. But before I do that, when I go around here, I want it to go all the way around here, so I need to fillet this edge first. So I'm going to fillet this edge, and I'll also select this edge, and for those I want to be radius 5. So this fillet right in here, radius 5, and I'll select OK to that. Alright, now next I want to put a radius 5 fillet along this edge, but I'm going to show you how the order in which you do fillets. makes a difference. So I'm going to do fillet, and I'm going to select this edge and this edge and this one, same way on the other side, that one, this edge and this edge, and I'll go ahead and accept that. And so notice how this is coming towards the inside here, and then I'll do a fillet on this edge, and it goes all the way around, and this edge, and again that fillet's pointing towards the inside here. Now I'm going to undo those two fillets, and then I'll put them in a different order. Alright, so let's do that fillet again. And so I'll do fillet, and I'm going to select this edge and this edge first, and I'll say OK to that, and then I'm going to do this edge and this edge. So I'll do this edge. Be careful when you're doing the fillet that you don't get a face. Now sometimes that's useful to get a face, but in this case I don't want the face, I want the edge. And I'll do fillet around that edge and around this edge. Again, be careful you don't get the face, get the edge. And right when I said that, I got the wrong thing. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to delete that last selection where it says face, and I'm going to get just this edge, and I'll say OK to that. Alright, then I want to go all the way around and up and across here, and I also want to fillet this area here and here. It's a little bit trickier doing the setback fillet on these vertices. And so I'm going to do a fillet, and actually let's start the command first. So I'll start the fillet command, and I'm going to turn off tangent propagation. Okay, so make sure you turn off that tangent propagation. Nothing is selected here. If it is, clear those selections. And then I'm going to select this edge. So we'll get these three edges that form that vertex right there. I'll select that edge, and I'll select this edge. So I have that one. Then I also need to get this edge, and I need to get this edge right here. So it highlights those 5 edges, but it doesn't show the preview of the fillet just yet. I need to do the same thing on the other side. So I'll select this edge, I'll select this edge, just that edge, I'll select the edge, not the face, I'll select this edge, and I'll select this edge. Once I have those 10 edges selected, then I can turn on tangent propagation, and it will go the rest of the way around. I'll come down here, and where it says setback parameters, I'm going to click in here to select the vertices. So I'll click in that box, and then I'll select this corner. You see it snap orange, and I'll select this corner, and I'll select this corner, and I'll select this corner, and then I'll go ahead and say OK. Now a difference in SolidWorks is when we did this setback, it added 5 to the 5 original. So I'm going to edit that feature, and instead of 12 down on the setback, so the original fillet's 5, and then I'll go down to the setback, and I'm going to do that as 7 rather than 12. So 7 plus 5 is 12. Alright, and then we'll put the 5 fillet here. So I'll select this edge, and I'll do fillet, and we'll say OK to that. Alright, so then I'll fillet this edge. So I'll fillet this edge, and that one will be a radius of 15. We'll say OK to that. Next, I want to put the drilled hole through this side and the tapped hole, the M12 by 1.75, over on that side. It's important to select the face first, and so I'll click on that face, and I'll go to the hole wizard, and I'm going to tell it I want to put a simple hole. So I'll click on hole, and then I'm going to go ahead and go to position, and if I move my mouse around you'll see that it snaps to the center of that arc. So that's where I want it. And then I'll go back to the type, and I'm going to tell it ANSI metric. So select ANSI metric, drill size. So make sure it's not dowel hole. Make sure it's on drill size. And for the size, I'm going to select the 20 millimeters. So I'll go down and I'll find the 20 millimeters. I don't want it to go all the way through. I only want it to go part way through. And so instead of through all, I'll tell it up to surface. And I'll select this surface on this side. So I want it to go just up to that surface and stop. I'll say OK to that. Right, then I want to put the threaded hole on this face. So I'll click on that face first. And then I'll do the hole wizard. I'm going to go ahead and put the position, so I'll go to position and I'll just move my mouse until I see it snaps to the center. I'll go back to type and I'm going to put it on threaded hole. ANSI metric, where it says bottom tapped, I'm going to tell it just tapped hole. Okay, tapped hole, and I want that to be an M12 by 1.75. And so I have M12 by 1.75, and for this one I'm going to tell it to go through all, so it'll go from this face all the way through the part, and I will set the thread to also go from here all the way through the part, and we'll say OK to that. We'll save it. Alright, so I need to lengthen this out now, so that should be 355. So let's go ahead and edit the original sketch. Sketch number 1, I'll edit that sketch. I'll change this to 355. And I'll hit the confirmation corner to accept that. And so there is our part. Now I may want to put some paint on this part. So let me go ahead and save it. And then I'm going to go to the top node of the part, and I'll right click, and I'll go to the beach ball to the appearance, and I'm going to set the appearance of the handle. So I'll click on this gray ball right here, and I'll select a color for my handle, whatever color you want. Now I may want to take the paint off of some of these faces, so I can right click, I'll go to the appearance and I'll go to that face appearance, and I'll select a neutral color say that, and I might, with this highlighted, hold the control key down and select that face as well. And I don't know if it's going to remove the thread feature on that, and it did, so I'm going to control unselect that one. I'll just leave it the way it is. And then it didn't actually remove the feature, it just removed the cosmetic texture, and I don't want to remove that cosmetic texture. Alright, so I'll say OK to that. Then I want to remove paint off of a portion of this handle. So as the operator uses this thing day after day, that paint would wear off anyway, so maybe I'll just want it chrome plated from some distance out here. I'm going to do the split of this face slightly different than the way we did it in Inventor, but we could have done it exactly the same way in Inventor. So I'm going to look at this thing from the front view, and I'll do a new sketch on the front plane, and I'm going to draw a line here vertically like that, and then I'll dimension the distance from this line to the origin. I'll dimension that as 100 millimeters. So we just did a sketch of a line that we can use to split that, and we could have done it exactly the same way in Inventor. So then I'm going to go to the Features tab, and underneath Curves, underneath this drop down, I'll select Split Line, and it has that current sketch selected as my split line, and then the faces to split, I want to split this face, and I'll say OK to that. So now we see that split line right here between those two faces. I'll right click on this face, I'll go to the appearance of that face, and I have it selected to this neutral color, and I'll also select that face. So I have those two faces selected. Now if you want to, you could put a chrome texture on that instead of just my neutral color that I used. So that completes the handle.